Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna wait a couple of seconds just to let everybody hop onto the webinar, and then we will go ahead and get started. Welcome. And if you want to let us know in the chat box, where you're watching us from, we're always curious to know. Please feel free to do so. Welcome. Awesome. So we already have a couple of people hopping on. Alina Koda, she said hello. Hello, welcome everyone.
Hey, Alina.
Joining from Temecula. Awesome. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. So my name is Bianca Gonzalez, and I am the Bullying Prevention Program Coordinator with the Riverside Medical Clinic Charitable Foundation. And welcome to our Take 30 webinar. I just want to go ahead and thank our wonderful sponsor that supports us in all of our programming, the Riverside Medical Clinic. We truly, truly appreciate your support. And I just want to let everybody know a couple of logistics regarding Zoom. So obviously some of you already know the chat box function. So that's where we will be interacting as our main form during the webinar. So this is going to be an interactive webinar. There's going to be a couple of questions from our presenter today throughout the webinar. So please feel free to interact in that way. And then we will be having a short Q&A session towards the end of the webinar as well. So if you have any questions, you can save them towards the end. So we're also going to be sending a short survey after the webinar. We truly, truly appreciate just reading your feedback. And I now want to go ahead and introduce our presenter for today. His name is Jericho Bulaun. Jericho is a transformational coach and speaker whose journey through self-awareness was triggered by his own identity crisis. Learning about mindfulness and cultivating a powerful presence, he now helps people through similar journeys of self-discovery, fulfilling potential, and achieving personal success. So with all that being said, I now want to go ahead and give it away to Jericho.
Thanks, Bianca. Thank you for that, and thanks for having me here. That was I forgot that intro was a thing, and hearing it back is refreshing. So thank you for that. Like Bianca was saying, my name is Jericho Bulaun. I'm a transformation coach and speaker. My work focuses around cultivating mindful self-awareness for inner freedom, to help people create. To help people enjoy a life they love creating. And I wanted to set some context for this presentation that I'm about to share with you today, which is called Stepping Out of Character and Into Ourselves. So the first thing that I want to say is one of our most basic needs as people, as humans, is to be accepted. This is something that is very primal. This is something that has been in us since time began. And with that need, right, what happens is we find ourselves sometimes living in fear of being rejected by the tribe, so to speak, right? And this fear is something that our ego takes and runs with it, and it plays a game, right? This fear is the kind of basis of the game that is, what do I do to become more likable? How do I receive more love? Or if I can't figure that out for myself, how do I damage someone else or something else so that that is not liked, and we're both not liked, right? It's almost like a lose-lose situation for everyone. And this is the game that our ego plays, which is driven by this fear of being rejected, off the core need of being accepted, right? So with this presentation, with this material that I'm about to share with you today, the aim is to start to introduce a little bit more confidence around who we are behind the characters that we've built ourselves up to be. And this is going to be a theme throughout the presentation. And this image here actually is from a movie called Ready Player One. If you know it, then well done to you. It's a great movie. And you know, the idea is that these people are also living characters in a game. So I just wanted to let you know that that was a thread that's going to run through this presentation, this idea of characters, this idea of movies and games. So with that all being said, like with any game and like with any movie, it all starts with a download. And for us as humans, that download begins the moment that we are born, and it lasts for 7 years. Now, for anyone here that has ever downloaded anything from the internet, maybe some things that you download take an hour, 2 hours. If your internet's really good, it might take a few minutes, right? But can you imagine downloading for 7 years, the amount of things that you experience, the amount of things that are kind of wired into this part of ourselves that form the basis of who we are? Now, when I say download mode, it's quite literal, because the frequency that our brain is operating at in these years is between 4 and 8 hertz, which is really, really low, which is why a newborn baby doesn't have the ability to stay awake for longer than a few minutes, because their brain is so low, it's so focused on just receiving, it can't actually give anything else, right? So during this time, and it changes over the 7 years, our ability for critical thinking, our capacity to think critically, is almost non-existent. And critical thinking is the ability to analyze and to form a judgment of our own, right? So again, if you imagine downloading things for 7 years, these are emotional responses to certain situations. These are how we treat people. This is how we feel like we should be treated, right? All of these things get wired into our subconscious. And now what happens is, our subconscious is formed of the beliefs that we hold. We don't know any better, and we don't believe any different. These then start to create some narratives, some stories. The stories then start to impact our behaviors. Our behaviors form habits, and the habits form patterns in our lives, right? So it really starts from the download. It really starts from when we're younger. All of these things are wired into the part of us that believes something about how we should be treated, about who we are. And this is something that we use for most of our lives. And actually, maybe this is a good point. This is a good point to ask the question that is on the screen here. What percentage of our lives do we spend using our subconscious? And maybe if you just take a moment to type an answer in the chat box. So from 0 to 7, we are wired to be a certain way. We learn everything that we learn about the world from 0 to 7. And from 7 onwards, how much time in percentage do we spend referencing those things that we learn? And maybe Bianca, you can help me out with anyone that's answering the question.
Yes, so please feel free to add your response in the chat box. There was somebody that raised their hand. I believe it was Frank. If you have a question, you can add it in the chat box. Okay, so
let me see if I can get it up.
Lena, she noted 15%. Any more guesses?
I'll give you a clue. It's much higher than that. It's much higher than 15.
Okay, so Frank noted 85%. I believe Yvonne noted, I believe it depends on age. For an adult, I believe it would be around 20%.
Yeah, wow. So we've got a nice range of answers, right? So the answer is actually, if it will click, 95%. Most of our responses, most of how we deal with our emotions, how we build our relationships, how we feel like we should be treated, and how we start to behave, these things are referenced 95% from the ages of 0 to 7. So we only create something new in our lives. We only create something new about ourselves 5% of our life. 5% of the time, we are using a part of our brain, the conscious part of our brain, to create something new. And the idea that we're going to start to address in this is, how do we step out of this 95%? And how do we start to use that 5% more often, right? So it starts to, the ratio starts to get a little bit better, excuse me. So this is the basis of how our characters, right? Our characters are built and how they change over time. And actually what we're going to find out is, the characters that we show up as, more often than not, they're built on the same stuff. It's just they have a different face. So when you're when you're young, and maybe, let's say, for example, you were not emotionally supported, it wasn't safe for you to express yourself, what do you think that does to a teenager? And then as a teenager, you start to explore the world and do different things. And then what do you think that experience does to that same person as an adult, right? So the thread that ties all of your characters together, even though you feel like externally you're changing over time, it's still these beliefs that you hold about yourself. How safe are you? How seen are you? How loved are you? How much do you deserve these things, right? There's a lot of the work I do with people is addressing how unworthy they feel to be who they are, to be where they are, and a whole bunch of other stories that kind of limit people's lives. So with that, as we get older, I kind of identified two different sets of mindsets that we can be pushed into. Now, you may have heard of the growth mindset and the fixed mindset. I want to introduce, or at least for the purpose of this presentation, present to you these two: the victim mindset and the achiever. Now, the victim is maybe something that might be familiar to you. Maybe you've heard this term before. The victim is the one that blames everyone and doesn't take accountability. It's never their fault. They justify why they can't do something based on their circumstance, maybe where they grew up, maybe they were never taught, or they were never supported, or they blame their circumstances on everyone else but themselves, and they never feel like they're good enough. And so they say no to themselves before the world tells them no. They don't go for the job that they think they really want, because there's a belief in them that they don't even deserve it in the first place. Now, the achiever, on the other hand, is someone who's noticed this pattern in themselves. They've noticed that actually, I can't play a victim for my whole life, and maybe there's something I can do about it. And that's the important part to note. The achiever is the victim who has acknowledged they have some sort of control. They can take accountability for how they do things and where they put themselves. So the achiever is the one that says, no matter what my circumstance is, I'm going to prove these people wrong. And they rarely do it for themselves. It's always to be better than someone. It's always to prove someone wrong. It's always because there are things that they need to rise above, right? This is the achiever mindset. Now, on the surface, the achiever might look like they're in a better position than the victim. But based off what I was saying in the last slide, these two types of people are just as damaged as each other. There's an underlying belief that they're both not good enough, and they've both just taken a different route, a different way of expressing that belief. So the victim believes they're not good enough, and so they don't do anything. The achiever thinks they're not good enough. They believe that they're not good enough, but they're going to try their best to prove that thing wrong. And so what I haven't noted on this slide is that there is a third option. There's a third way of being. There's a third mindset to adopt, so that it pushes you out of one of these two things, and you start to live from a place where this isn't limiting you anymore. So I mentioned that the victim acknowledges control and transitions into an achiever. Now, the third one is what I call an aligned being, someone who is aligned, right? They're not being pulled left or right. They are viewing the world as they see it, and it's aligned to who they are. Now, if the achiever who has taken control of their actions and is taking accountability, if the achiever acknowledges what they believe about themselves, this is a step in the direction of out of character and into themselves. But of course, they're still living by this fear, right? They're still living by this fear that they need to be accepted and that they're going to be rejected, right? The fear of rejection, they're still living by this fear, which drives both of these two behaviors. And so when that fear gets in the way, this is what happens. And actually, at this moment, I want to take a quick pause to see, I feel like there are some things coming up in the chat box. Such an interesting perspective as a principle and logo like this. Amazing. Yeah, and yoga is a great practice, right? Yoga is a great practice to have. It really is something that connects not just how you think, but how you feel, and then your physical body. So it really does align all of those three things, which is something we're going to get to. So thank you, Alina, for that. So moving on to the next slide. I mentioned the fear being a blocker to taking that step, right? Taking that step out of ourselves. And here is where this kind of movie analogy is going to come in. So something is blocking us from taking this objective view of ourselves, right? The ones who have been built up to be these characters. There is something in the way, which is that fear, right? And this is the analogy that I want to use. If you think about your life scenarios and any situation that you turn up to as a movie set, right? On the right, we have a movie set. This is where all the action happens. This is where the actors turn up. This is where the crew is, this is where everything happens. Now, before the actors or the characters, should I say, show up to this set, they have to go to wardrobe. They go to costume. And if it's a movie, for example, about pirates, or if there's a scene with a pirate in it, one of the actors is going to get made up to look like a pirate. Maybe they're going to give him an eye patch, maybe give him a parrot, all these kind of stereotypical things. They'll give him one of those cool little ship hats, whatever they call them, pirate hats. And the pirate then turns up to the scene. And so what happens is, in our lives, we look at life this way and we block ourselves off and kind of cycle between the wardrobe and the set. We look at a situation and we say, okay, what do I need in this situation? This situation feels like it's something that requires me to be angry. Someone's disrespected me. Someone's done this. And so I choose a costume that makes me angry. And then I show up as an angry person. I show up as someone who's disrespected. I show up as someone who is going to try and get some revenge. And I go to the wardrobe and I turn up to the set. And then when something else changes, I go back to the wardrobe. And this is the cycle that we keep ourselves in, of going to the wardrobe, putting something on that we feel like the situation needs, but we rarely take the step and saying, who is the one that is putting these things on in the first place? Because if all of these characters are coming from me, then surely there must be someone here. If I'm the one that has the capability to be angry, if I also have the capacity for compassion, if I also have love, then who is the one that is all coming from? And this is the question that we rarely ask ourselves, because we identify so heavily with the characters that we're told we are. And maybe those things might be our job roles, right? Our social status, our financial status. It could be a bunch of things that we identify as, and we choose to put those things on when we feel like they serve us, but we don't really question who's the one putting those things on in the first place. So a useful thing that might be actually a really good exercise to do. If we have time at the end, I would love to walk through this exercise, but maybe just take a note of this, right? In the moments where you feel like you're becoming and embodying a character, there are things that you can remind yourself of to take this objective view, which are your values, your priorities, and the question of who am I being right now? And again, if we have time at the end, I would love to kind of dive deeper into that. But just to kind of keep the flow of this presentation, I'm going to leave that as it is for now. So this is the cycle that we keep ourselves in, going from wardrobe to set, but never really questioning who's the one putting these things on in the first place. And so to step out of character and into ourselves, we ask that question, who's the one putting it on? And then we implement something that might be useful for us. So if it clicks, here's the question. What is the name of the response that is triggered by acute trauma in our bodies? This is something that is linked to the fear that we live in, right? This fear of being rejected causes this type of stress that we, especially in this day and age, that we live in this state most of the time. So again, if you, I'll give you like 30 seconds to type an answer in the chat box, and Bianca, maybe you can help me read some of these out.
All right, so we have one from Yvonne: fight, flight, and freeze.
Yeah.
Any other guesses? Okay, I think
everyone's agreeing. Yeah, everyone's agreeing with that, and it's
yeah,
the right answer.
seems like it.
So fight or flight, and actually you gave the full kind of name for it, which is fight, flight, or freeze, which is amazing, right? So we spend most of our time in this fight or flight response, and what happens is the more wires we connect in this fight or flight response, the more we validate the stories that we've told ourselves, right? So the more we go back to this wardrobe and say, if I put this angry face on and I go up to this and I turn up to this situation and I get the response that I feel like I should get when I'm angry, then it's going to validate me as an angry person. It's going to validate me as the need to be angry when something happens, right? Rather than taking a step back and saying, is there a different way for me to show up right now, rather than just putting on this angry face? So we spend most of our time in fight or flight, which is why we don't access the 5% of creating a new response for something that we've learned from our childhood, right? So now I'm going to talk about some things that we can do to step into ourselves, and I've split it into two things. One, an inner workout, and another one is an acronym for self, which I hope is fun and also useful at the same time. So inner workout, that feels to be quite self-explanatory, but you know, when we're going to the gym, we exercise our muscles, and when we study, we are exercising our brain. But what about exercising our emotions? What about exercising the things that we feel, being familiar with how we respond to things, being familiar with the things that trigger us, being familiar with how we are able to sit and feel all the things that are happening on the inside. So one of the things that is really useful is implementing some sort of mindful practice, and Alina mentioned earlier yoga, right? Yoga is an amazing mindful practice. It really forces you to focus on your body and your mind and your breath all at the same time, which are some of the other practices like meditation, journaling, breath work, and walks in nature, I was going to say, before they fuse together. But really, you know, a mindful practice is about familiarizing yourself with yourself. And I think there's a Tibetan word for meditation, which is gompa, which literally means to familiarize. And so if we look at it that way, we have the opportunity to implement something that enables us to familiarize ourselves with ourselves. When something is, when we feel like we've been abandoned, when we feel like we've been betrayed, is there something that was wired into our subconscious when we were 0 to 7 years old, and maybe a little bit older, right? Was there something that was wired into our subconscious that made us react in a certain way to those things happening, right? And in a mindful practice, we have the opportunity to explore all of that. And sometimes it's useful to get help. We don't want to kind of ruminate and just force ourselves into a downward spiral, right? Getting help in these types of situations is always useful. The other 2 points that I've put on here, honoring your curiosity and finding your bus stops, these 2 things almost go together. And I'll start with the last one. So finding your bus stop. I had a conversation a while ago about inspiration being one of the most fulfilling feelings, right? And I thought, well, people always talk about wanting to be inspired, or if they don't want to be inspired, they're lacking inspiration, which is why they find that their life is boring. They find that their life is monotonous. They find that, there's nothing interesting happening. And if the destination that we would like to get to is inspiration, which then leads to a bunch of other things like happiness, joy, peace, love, clarity, then we need to be able to identify what bus stop to be at so that we can get there. And the more time we spend at these bus stops, the more time we spend in things that bring us a feeling of inspiration. And maybe if you're a musician, maybe that's writing songs, maybe that's listening to poetry, maybe that's painting a painting, maybe that's, the more time you spend in moments of inspiration, you start to step out of this character that you've been building yourself up to be, and you start to step into who you actually are. And again, with the second one, honoring your curiosity, sometimes, with this fear of being rejected, we don't honor the things that we are curious about because we think it's not going to be cool. People are not going to like me if I tell them that I like this. But I guarantee you, the more you honor your curiosity, the more you honor the things that you feel on the inside, you're going to find a completely different community that you didn't know existed. And you're going to enjoy that a lot more than your current situation of telling yourself that it's not possible for you, telling yourself that you just need to fit in, telling yourself that, people are going to like me this way. So I'd rather squeeze myself into this box so that no one questions me. So implement a mindful practice. Familiarize yourself with yourself, the things that make you tick, the things that make you feel excited, the things that make you, that trigger you into something that maybe you don't want to feel, the things that you might be avoiding. Become familiar with those things, honor the things that you are curious about, and find the things that will take you to a place of inspiration. These are all things that that make up this kind of inner workout that we can do to start to step back into ourselves. And I try to think of an acronym for self in moments that you find you are not being yourself, or when you're being triggered into a character. I try to think of an acronym to do with games, and we'll see how I did. So it's to select a value to prioritize. And again, this links back to the exercise I mentioned earlier. So for example, a value might be, I'm valuing open and honest communication. That's one I always choose. I always choose to value that and to prioritize that. Open and honest communication, which then forms healthy relationships, right? Equip an empowering statement. I am confident, I am safe, I am seen, I am heard, I am loved. All these types of things. In the moments where we feel like we're not all of those things, equip a statement that is empowering to you, and you can decide for yourself what this is, right? Load and process how you felt in a situation. So not just to acknowledge that there's something coming up, but really allow it to fully move through your body. If the anger or frustration or whatever it is comes up, give yourself a moment to really feel that thing. Because the more we suppress it, it's going to cycle and cycle again until we allow it to release. So load and process how you felt in the situation, really let it do what it's supposed to do in your body, and be more comfortable, or at least try to be more comfortable with those feelings, so that you can be familiar with them, right? And then bring everything to a fire, burn and release anything that doesn't serve you. So with the loading and the processing, you start to learn lessons that teach you things that you might be doing something in your life right now that that doesn't bring any value. You might be being someone or being around people that don't bring you any value. And don't be afraid to release these things. Don't be afraid to let go of the things that don't add value to your life. And the more we can release the things that don't serve us, we can create space and invite things that do, right? So number one, an inner workout, and two, remind yourself. Those two things are steps that we can take into ourselves when we find that we're becoming or continuing to be these characters that are no longer serving us in our lives. So before we finish and jump into some questions, which I'm really excited to do, here's some of the things that you can take away from this session. Your subconscious is wired, but it can change with awareness and being aware of the things that have that you've experienced. Being aware of your programming, your conditioning, is the first step that we can take to notice the patterns and behaviors that we've been displaying for our whole lives. Being mindful of your beliefs is the trigger into alignment. So I mentioned the victim, the achiever, and the aligned being. When you can notice what you believe about yourself, what you really believe about yourself, it starts to trigger you into being more aligned with your values and who you are. Take the objective view and get behind the character. So this is just a reminder, when we find ourselves going back and forth between the wardrobe and the set, there is also someone behind that. There's the scenario, there's the wardrobe, and then there's something here that exists. And if you can get to this space, then more often than not, you can take steps out of these characters and into yourself. And the last one, do an inner workout and remind yourself. So a mindful practice, honoring your curiosity, finding your bus stops, and the acronym, select a value, equip an empowering statement, load and process how you feel, and bring everything to a fire and release what doesn't serve you. So just being mindful of the time. I think I got that in good time, Bianca. So I hope there's enough time for questions. Thank you all for being here, and I'm excited to answer some questions.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I guess that's one of my first questions for you, is how can you be reached? So obviously you can be reached in a lot of different platforms on social media, and you have your email as well on there.
Yeah.
So that's great. I don't know if you would like to just bring up that activity that you were talking about. I feel like we
have
a little bit of time. If you just want to kind of go over it, I think, yeah, we could do it.
Yeah, so this is a really simple exercise that you can, it doesn't have to be perfect this time around. You can revisit it and you can add to it anytime you feel like you would like to. So it's about identifying your values, right? And your values will start to drive the decisions that you make in your life, right? So I gave an example earlier about valuing open and honest communication. And if ever I'm in a conversation where I feel like something doesn't feel right, I get to value how I am going to show up in this conversation. How am I going to show up? Am I going to be open? Am I going to be honest? And at least if I'm open and honest, then I know I'm holding myself accountable for how I react, rather than saying, I feel like they're lying to me, I feel like they're being dishonest, and I'm going to lie as well because that's what they're giving to me. I'm going to give it to them right back, right? So it's about how you show up, and your values will start to become the drivers for your behavior. So the exercise is this: just write a bunch of values down, right? Write as many things down as you feel like are your values. So family, happiness, like I said, honesty, openness, all these types of things. Just write these things down, and you can have 10, 20, 30, however many you like. Once you have a list of values that you feel like is comprehensive enough, and again, you can add to this list whenever you want, I want you to create 2 columns, one that says means, or these are things that you can actually do, things that you can implement yourself. And the other column is ends, so outcomes, or a situation that you would expect something in return, right? So they don't have to match one-to-one. But for example, I value healthy relationships, and that is an outcome. That's an ends, right? And maybe an input or a means would be honest communication. Like, I keep referencing that one because it's my favorite one. But again, they don't have to match up. But when you get these two lists of things that you can actually implement, you know, a person that you could be, I can be the person that is open, I can be the person that is honest, and as an outcome, I expect a healthy relationship. So the moment that someone is making a relationship unhealthy, you get a decision. Am I going to show up as the person who is going to be the open and honest one to cultivate a healthy relationship? Or this is not a healthy relationship, I can cut it off if I want to. So those values you can use as drivers to your decisions, and it really starts to make you aware of how you respond to situations rather than just knee-jerk reaction, right? So let me know if that makes sense, and let me know what you think of that exercise, and I would love to actually spend some time walking through some of these things, but I know we might not have that much time.
That was great. Actually, if you can just repeat, we have one question specifically regarding the exercise. Just the list that you spoke about, what would you title them again? I know that you said ends and then.
Yeah, so it's means and ends, right? So you can make it something that makes sense to you. I like using those two words, but you can say like things I can actually implement and things I would like to get, right? So maybe I don't know, I'm trying to think now. Something like maybe you could value peace, right? That is an outcome. That is an outcome of a situation. And what else is an outcome? Things that bring you joy, inspiration, like you could value all of those things, right? But on the other side of means, I could be someone who is forgiving. I could be empathetic. I could be compassionate. I can be, you know, so there are values of the person that you can be and the values that you kind of could receive as an outcome of a situation. Does that make it clearer? Hopefully.
I hope so. Yes. Alina noted, yes, it does. And I'm so glad I'm here today just to hear that alone. Yvonne noted, yes, thank you. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, it takes work to do these things, but in the end, the outcome is super positive and rewarding. But it's a process. But that's how you can get started, is just by doing this exercise, just starting by doing this. So I really appreciate that. And anything, if we have any educators here, any professionals that work with youth, you know, this is definitely an exercise that you can also share with them as well. So please feel free to do so. We have one question that I can answer. So yes, you will be getting a copy of this recording and the PowerPoint. You will be receiving that most likely within 24 to 48 hours. I will go ahead and send it to everyone that registered today. But any questions or comments, please feel free to leave them in the chat box and we will get those answered. In the meantime, I'm just going to add a link to our survey so you all have that. And I guess I have a question, just because everything is literally 100% virtual at the moment. I know that, you know, everybody's going back to school. Some school sites are meeting in person. But how would you correlate this with like social media? Like just comparing yourself to everything that you see online and just kind of thinking that what you're seeing is true, 100% true, and just creating those stories in your mind of like those just comparison stories that you create in your mind. Because I know us as adults, we do that, and I know students struggle with that too. But I know like these exercises and everything that you talked about would kind of help in a way with helping with everything that you see on social media as well.
Yeah, yeah. It's a great question, and comparison anxiety is one of the most crippling things, especially like you said with social media. Um, we have the opportunity to remind ourselves that you know all of these things that we see online are curated, right? They're very specific moments. They are very designed things to get a response, someone to double tap, someone to give them a like, someone to give them a comment, right? And we get to remind ourselves that they are also people behind that, people with real people with real problems, right? And maybe this is um, just to be kind of transparent with you. I've worked with a few, influencers, as you might call them, and you know the life that they create for themselves is it's a job, right? These people that are online, it's a job for them. And again, they are real people with real problems. And actually, most of the time, the ones that I've gotten to work with, they want to try and separate themselves from the person that they've created themselves to be online. And again, it's this idea of stepping out of this character that they've created, right? So um, my biggest thing with social media is always a reminder that people are, if they're not trying to help you in any way, if they're not an educator, if they're not giving you information, if they're not providing you with some value, then you always have to remind yourself that this is something that is curated. It's a designed moment, a picture that has someone's put time and effort into creating this thing that makes you want to uh, click on this thing, right? And it's to show you that this online feed of who I am is the one that you're going to see, and you don't get to see when I'm alone in my room and maybe breaking down because I'm depressed, right? I'm not going to show you that. I'm going to show you the person that is going to make you like me, right? This whole idea again from the beginning of this fear of being rejected. We want to be accepted anywhere we can go. We want to be accepted online. We want to be accepted in school. We want to be accepted, so all these people we show up as differently, and and you know the idea of this whole presentation is, how do we break all of those things down? How do we break all of those characters down so that I can show up as who I am and feel completely fine with that, and actually love being who I am all the time, right? Does that answer your question?
Yes, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. We have a question from Alina, and
Yeah.
she's asking, do you think having compassion for ourselves when we are about to dress into character, as you say, and just take a step back and understand there's a reason we do that, is a way to sort of reparent ourselves?
Yeah, for sure. Uh, part of the work, that I do, especially in the beginning of, when I'm just starting this kind of coaching relationship with someone, it's to understand where they were in their childhood, the things that they experienced as a child that maybe um, wired these beliefs into who they are, right? So when you say, is it a way to reparent ourselves? That's 100% it. We get to go inside and find that hurt child, right? The 5-year-old that was told, um, you know, uh, someone that, for example, there's one that I'm thinking of now that was told when she was younger, um, be quiet, no one wants to hear you sing. And it might sound harmless when we're just an annoyed parent or something, but for a kid to hear that and believe, oh, it's not safe for me to express myself through singing. And so she never honored her curiosity, she never sang a song, she never, and only now that she's getting older, she realized that she has a real passion for this stuff and that she's really good at it. And so the stories that we tell ourselves, I mean, sorry, the way that we step out of this stuff is exactly like you say, a way to reparent ourselves. We give ourselves the parenting that we needed when we were younger, right? It's completely safe to be not okay at singing. You can sing however you want, whenever you want, and that's okay because that's an expression of who you are on the inside, right? Um, But that's a great question, and I think you're right. It's definitely a way for us to reparent ourselves when things have been shaky in our past, right?
Thank you. Shout out to Alina. She is our marketing and events coordinator. So she has some great questions.
Yeah, thanks, Lena, for that question.
So we have another one from Diane, and she's asking, I find that I can build a lot of excitement with an idea, and the minute I have to step out, I hit a wall, and then I seem to retreat, and it's frustrating that I cannot seem to get past the wall. Do you have any advice?
Yeah, something that happens is that when we hit this wall that you talk about, it's because our mind is overtaken with the idea of failure, right? We don't want to inquire with this idea because if it fails, maybe there's a story underneath that if I fail, I'm not going to be loved. I'm not going to receive the validation that I feel like I need because I'm going to fail. And I'm kind of right now I'm almost like expediting the insight because of the format that this is. I don't want to take too much time. But essentially, this is a response that you have to something that you experienced where you tried to do something and it failed, and someone told you that it wasn't okay. Someone told you it wasn't okay to fail. And so something that you can try is just play it out in your head, right? What is the absolute worst that happens if this idea doesn't land, right? And actually, when I do this exercise with people, the most extreme cases, I fail, I lose my job, I get kicked out of my apartment, and I end up homeless, right? And in that moment, you get to say to yourself, okay, well, right now, am I safe? Right now, I've got a roof over my head. Right now, I've got a job. Right now, that stuff isn't true. And so I can at least try, right? And the moment that you actually do end up homeless, then maybe you got to try something different. But for as long as you are still safe, for as long as you are still able to try, the least you can do is honor that idea and allow it to come through you so that you can see what impact it has on not just yourself, but the people that receive that idea, right? I hope that makes sense, Diane.
Thank you. Thank you. I guess I want to end it on that because that was just a great response. And Diane noted thank you. But I just want to go ahead and thank you, Jericho, for taking the time out of your day. It is, what time is it over there where you're at?
It's almost about to be 9 p.m.
9 p.m. So I just thank you for taking the time out of your day
My
to
pleasure.
be with us for our Take 30 webinar. I appreciate everybody that registered today as well. This is how you can reach him, and you will be receiving all of this information, like I said, within 24 to 48 hours. And the recording will be uploaded on our YouTube channel as well. And if you have any final words, Jericho?
No, just thank you. Thank you for setting this up. I really enjoyed it. And thank you everyone for the questions. And I hope there was some value that was taken today. So yeah, thank you.
Definitely. Thank you, everyone. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. Happy Cinco de Mayo. Bye, everyone.
Oh, happy Cinco de Mayo.
Yeah.
See ya.
Bye.